Again, welcome to today's webinar, Build Scalable and Secure Mobile Applications with AWS. Our presenter today is Powell. Powell worked as a project manager at AWS Device Farm. Prior to AWS, Powell co-founded AppPack, a company that allowed mobile developers to test their apps on real Android and iOS devices in the cloud, which was required by AWS. Powell has also held various engineering and management positions at Intel. Today with us, we also have Andrew Hawker, Rohan Deshpande, and Dennis Hill. They'll be our moderators today, answering your questions throughout the presentation. Powell, I'll go ahead and turn the call over to you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Build Scalable and Secure Mobile Applications with AWS. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about why AWS thinks that this space is very important, why we think that mobile developers should get all of the help that they need, that they can get to build mobile apps. So if you look at the numbers, based on the research done by App Annie earlier this year, there are over 4 million apps in App Store and Google Play today. Moreover, building an app is an investment. So it takes, roughly 18 weeks on average to build mobile applications. And finally, even if you spend all of this time trying to put your product in a very competitive market, there is a 25% chance that your application will be abandoned after the first use. And this is AWS thinks that we can help mobile developers to succeed in this market by allowing them to use our services and tools to do all of the heavy lifting. And when you build your app, very often you have to make compromises, right? It's all about finding the right balance. How many new unique features do I want to develop that will attract my customers versus spending time on building a very good backend that will scale and perform to handle the influx of new users. Similarly, often there are trade-offs between application quality and the time to market. Do I want to test more and release a higher quality product? Or do I actually want to take more risk and release my application to the market quickly? And AWS offers a number of services that help developers to address all of these areas. And more importantly, AWS allows you to spend your time where your customers will appreciate it the most. Because typically, when you build on the mobile application, the customers will see just the interface and will not be able to fully appreciate all of the backend infrastructure that you spend your time building. And typically, when you look your application stack, this is actually where most of your work is going, building the infrastructure, building all of the guts of the application that actually power the mobile experience. And with AWS, you can actually spend more time on building what will make your application unique and successful in the market. So let's get started with a very quick overview of what AWS offers in this space. When you look at the development lifecycle and also our portfolio of services, that can be essentially split into 3 categories: services that will help you develop apps, services that will help you deliver apps, and finally services that will help you engage your customers and track the users of your app. And let's start with the ones that will help you develop your application more efficiently and quickly. So first of all, in general with AWS, you get scalability. So you can use services, for instance, like Lambda, straight from your mobile application that will allow you to scale very, very quickly on demand and actually do not pay for extra capacity when you don't need it. So rather than maintaining a full farm of either on-premise service or even EC2 instances, you can simply use Lambda and pay only for the compute that is used as your users use the app, rather than having this extra capacity that you might not need all the time, but it's still there and it's costing you money. So in addition to this, we offer high flexibility. So we do not lock you into any specific language, any specific tool, or any specific IDE. You can consume these services using our very flexible APIs in the language of your choice, and you can do it straight from your preferred IDE, for instance, Android Studio or Xcode. And like I mentioned before, and it's true not just for services like Lambda, but all of the other services that I'm going to be talking about today, in most cases, you have an option to pay as you go and pay just for what you use. So there's no need to make any commitment up front. You can scale as your application usage scales. And finally, security. Security is paramount for all of the AWS services, and it's the highest priority for us. And of course, all of the data that you put in AWS belongs to you, and you're in control of this data. And in addition to this, you can benefit from a number of compliance programs that AWS participates in. So when you combine these three, scalability, flexibility, and security, you can then fully appreciate all of the benefits of using AWS services to actually build your mobile backend. And speaking of services themselves, when you think of the mobile application, there are a number of tasks and activities that you will likely need to perform, and let's kind of go over them one by one, and I'll be later on demoing them, or at least some of them, in the demo presentation, and demo part of the presentation. So first, one of the obvious tasks that you might want to do as the mobile application developers, authenticate your users. And we make it very, very easy with a service like Amazon Cognito. Then, like I mentioned before, you may want to run server logic. And again, Lambda comes in very, very handy. You can define pretty much all of your backend as a server in the serverless architecture, and do not maintain extra overhead. Lambda makes it very, very simple. Another benefit of using Cognito is the ability to synchronize data. So you can synchronize data using very easy key value pair based approach. Then speaking of tracking user engagement that I mentioned before, we have a service like Amazon Mobile Analytics that allows you to both analyze user behavior as well as track their retention. Excuse me. In addition to tracking user retention, you may want to also re-engage your users. And one of the services that we offer, Amazon SNS, can be used just for that. You can use push notifications and SMS messaging to re-engage your users and bring them back into a fold. And finally, we briefly talked about the delivery phase of the application lifecycle. One of our services called Device Farm allows you to test your application just before you release. So it's a very, very quick and easy and efficient way to make sure that whatever you're delivering to your customers is of high quality. And speaking of Device Farm, let's jump into the deliver portion of the pipeline and talk a little bit more about that service. So Device Farm is a service that we launched last year that allows you to test on real Android and iOS devices that we host in Amazon data centers. And Device Farm offers two primary mode of operations. The first one is manual testing, where you can simply request a device and interact with the device from within your browser simply by clicking on the device screen and performing other touch events like swipes. In addition to manual testing with remote access, you can also use automated testing. And automated testing allows you to upload your automated tests written in one of the popular frameworks that are supported by Device Farm and execute them on a number of devices. What's very interesting about automation is that you can integrate your automated tests executed on Device Farm into your continuous integration pipeline. So we offer out-of-the-box integrations with things like Jenkins and Gradle through the plugins that we offer. But in addition to this, everything that you do with Device Farm can be done via the API. So you can integrate Device Farm into your own custom pipeline or any other third-party tool using AWS SDK or CLI. Also, like I mentioned before, using Device Farm automation is very, very flexible. We support a large number of various frameworks for test automation on both Android and iOS. Some of them include Appium, Calabash, Espresso, XCTest, XUI, and so on. We'll be talking a little bit more about Device Farm later on during the presentation. And finally, additional interesting aspect of Device Farm that beyond regular functional testing, you can also use it for continuous monitoring of your application health And by application, I mean not just the client portion of your application, but the entire end-to-end system that you built. And one of our customers, Etsy, is using Device Farm just for that, by running functional tests very, very frequently, but also collecting non-functional data, like for instance end-to-end performance, while they run these tests, so they get a very good insight into how their application is performing end-to-end and where the bottlenecks are. So it's very, very easy to use Device Farm for some other use cases like these to get a more full picture of the application quality and performance. And finally, the last piece of or last category of services that we offer, Engage. We have two services in this family. The first one is already mentioned, Amazon Mobile Analytics, that allows you to essentially get insights into your user behavior. So you can get analytics data on usage, retention, and monetization. Of course, you can customize any events within your application, instrument custom events within your application, and then track these events to be able to know what's going on within your app, within your customer base. In addition to this, it's very, very easy to export all of the data from analytics to Redshift, so you can run complicated queries in order to analyze this behavior. And finally, Amazon Mobile Analytics is incredibly cheap. So the first 100 million events is free, and then you pay $1 per million events after that. The second service in the Engage category is SNS, that can be used in combination with analytics to actually engage your users. And SNS is a messaging service that allows you to message your users via email, SMS, mobile push, or even desktop push. And it enables you to do both direct and broadcast messaging, so you can engage your customers in campaigns, for instance, promotional campaigns, break some of the customers who turned back into the fold. And what's very interesting about it is that, of course, you can automate it all. So you can use SNS API to automate your campaigns, and for instance, based on data that you gathered in analytics. So now all of this stuff sounds really interesting, but you may want to know how all of this works together and how quickly I can get started with all of these services. So last year we launched a service called Mobile Hub that makes it very, very easy to get started with all of these, both services that can be used for development, like CloudLogic powered by Lambda, as well as services like Cognito or SNS for authentication and push. And let's jump to a quick demo right now so I can actually show you Mobile Hub in action, and I'll show you how easy it is to get started with some of the services that I talked about earlier. So let me share my screen. All right, so we are now looking at AWS Management Console, and you can find Mobile Hub as well as some of the other mobile services that I talked about right here on the mobile services section. So let's jump into Mobile Hub. The first thing that you will see here is a list of Mobile Hub projects, and every project corresponds to an application that I created. For the purpose of this demo, let's create a new one. So I'm going to name this project Webinar 2. I'm gonna click Create Project button, and our project is now created, and I can start building your app. And before we get started, let me give you a little bit of an overview what the Mobile Hub is and what the goal of Mobile Hub is. So Mobile Hub essentially allows you to very quickly put a skeleton application together, and that skeleton application will contain sample functionalities from the services that I described. So, I started talking about building a scalable backend powered by Lambda. So you can, for instance, add CloudLogic to the skeleton application right here, and what it will do is that it will stub all of the code and add all of the dependencies to the sample app, that will make it a fully functional app that can use Lambda functions on a backend. Similarly, I can easily enable user sign-in here, and that will add all of the Cognito related initializations as well as basic functionality that will make this app fully work with Cognito. While this creates essentially an empty sample app, and we're gonna actually build this up later once we're done with the first phase, even if you already have an application and if you don't want to start from scratch, it essentially gives you a customized example of how to use these various AWS services, so you can then apply these examples to your code simply by copy pasting. And actually Mobile Hub itself allows you to do that as well, because for every single integration that we do, you will have either an option to, hey, I want to build a brand new app, like a skeleton app, or please just show me what do I need to do to integrate it into my existing code. So let's get started, and let's pick some of these functionalities and let's build the skeleton application. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable user sign-in, and all of the, configuring all of these features is very straightforward, and will guide you through a wizard-like process. In addition to this, you get quite a lot of information here on the right-hand pane that talks, this information will essentially give you more details what the underlying service does, as well as will give you step-by-step instructions if anything else needs to be configured in addition to what we're doing here. So I'm gonna pick sign-in as optional, and I'm gonna, for the demo today, I'm gonna say I would like to have an optional signing in my application based on Google+. And the only thing that I have to do from now on is copy-paste client IDs from my Google Developer Console. If you don't have them, like I mentioned before, Mobile Hub will actually guide you through the process step by step, how to create a Google developer project, how to enable the proper APIs, and how to actually generate this O of IDs. I already have them, so I'm just going to copy-paste them from the notes. So I have a web client ID right here. Let me copy it to this box. I have an Android client ID right here. And finally, iOS client ID right here. And with this, I can just say save just, and this added Cognito-based sign-in to my sample application. And I can either now integrate my app, which will essentially take me to building the application, or actually allowing me to download the application source code so I can build it on my machine, or I can configure more features. So let's add a few more features before we move on. So the next thing that I'd like to add is, for instance, push notifications. So I can enable push right here. And today's demo is going to be Android only, so I'm going to select Android only. And again, I just need to paste two values from Google Developer Console. And if you do not have Google Messaging, so-called GCM enabled in your Google Developer account, Mobile Hub will guide you through the process here, and you can find step-by-step instructions. So let's go back to my notes. Let me copy an API key. I believe I have an extra space here, and the project ID, which is my sender ID. And with these two values, I can also select topics I want to publish to, and topics is an SNS concept, and we're going to look into topics in a little bit. But part of the configuration is selection of topics I want to be able to consume from this application, and Mobile Hub automatically created a topic that is prefixed with webinar 2, but I can of course create any other topic that I already created for SNS. Once I save these changes, this added the SNS configuration, messaging configuration to my sample app. Actually, I'll move to integrate. Let me move back to configure. Let me add one more thing. One more thing that I'd like to add is actually two more things. First, analytics, which is very straightforward. Sample analytics can be just enabled, and I don't need to make any configuration changes. Of course, this enables just certain events to be instrumented within the app, but you can easily extrapolate that sample code and apply it to any events once you see what's going on in your project. And finally, I'd like to enable Cloud Logic, which is, like I mentioned before, powered by Lambda. So once I click Enable Logic and save changes, Mobile Hub is actually going to create a sample Lambda function for me. And this is happening right now. It's going to be, if I refresh the function list, you can see that created a sample hello world function written in Node.js, and I can go and edit this function, see the code. So the function doesn't really do anything. It simply returns a value that we pass to it. But still, you will get a pretty good understanding of how the integration is actually accomplished. So later you can apply it to either your new set of functions for your serverless infrastructure or stuff that maybe you already written in the past. And if you're making any changes in this code, I mean, it's super easy to also test this. Lambda makes it easy to make changes, test them, make sure that it works. So you can see that we tested it. The value is really value 1, just like the code says, just like the parameter that we passed and set. So this all works as expected. Let's go back to the Mobile Hub. I have Mobile Hub open right here. Let me go to, keep the Lambda window open. Webinar 2. And so now we have a sample application with user sign-in. Actually, let's go to Cloud Logic. Okay, so this is good. So I have user sign-in, app analytics, push notifications, and Cloud Logic all enabled. So now let's move to the integrate phase. And the integrate phase essentially gives me two options that I mentioned before. First, I can either download a sample application that contains all of these functionalities stabbed in, as well as some demo widgets that allow you to see how they actually work. Or I can go through step-by-step instructions, first some general one, and then based on the functionality that will tell you what would you have to do to add these functionalities into your existing code base, right? So for instance, if I look at push notifications here, the Mobile Hub will guide you through what Gradle dependencies you need to add, how do you set up GCM receivers, how you have to modify your Android manifest, and so on and so on and so on. However, again, if you're just getting started, you can simply download a sample application and build it without having to modify a single line of code. What's also important, and I didn't mention this before, is that this functionality is very modular, so it's not like you have to add the entire AWS Mobile SDK to your application to get these functionalities. You pick and choose components that you want to use, and then dependencies are essentially tailored to it. So we help you manage the size of dependencies, so to speak. So without further delay, let's download the sample application. The sample application is downloaded. Let me unarchive it. And let me open Android Studio so I can actually see if this thing builds and runs. All right, so let's select Import Project. I'm going to go to Downloads. I believe the project name was Webinar 2. It's still not there. 1 second. There we go, Webinar 2. And if I select my sample app, Android Studio should import this project into its workspace. And this is happening right now. So let's give it 30 seconds while it builds, actually imports the project. All right. This is a warning that about a Gradle plugin version we can dismiss, and we can browse through the codes to see what's going on, what Mobile Hub really generated. So if you go to the project here, and if you jump straight to Java, you can see that this is my sample application with various activities. So for instance, if I go to this module, you can see, for instance, push manager in initialization. So this is what this code will. Excuse me, this code will register the application for notifications. Of course, most of the logic that we're calling here is going to be defined in Amazon AWS.mobile area. So you can see that a bunch of configuration is happening here based on the values that we provided, for instance, various IDs that you typed in. And here's a AWS Mobile Client definition that contains initializations of functionalities that we looked at. So this will give you a really good idea, how these services are integrated into your application code, and then how they can be, how they're initialized, and how they can be used from your application code. So, for instance, here we're looking at main activity. On create that initializes the identity manager, which we enabled in the mobile hub for Cognito based on Google federated login. So let's actually try to build this up and see how it looks. So I'm going to build an APK. And while this is building, I don't really have a local physical device here. I don't really want to use emulator either. So instead, let's use Device Farm. I talked about Device Farm before, the service that can use before both manual and automated testing of mobile applications. So let's actually jump to Device Farm. So if I go back to the console, I can see Device Farm right here. And if I go to Device Farm, the concept is very similar. You just create a project. I can create a new project called Webinar 2. I can create a project. Once I created a project, I have a choice to run automated tests or run a remote access session. So if I choose to run a remote access session, I can start a new session. Simply pick a device that I want. Let's assume that I would like to get a Galaxy S4 AT&T, for instance. And let's call the session hub demo on Samsung Galaxy S4. I can confirm and start a session. And now what's happening is that Device Farm is requesting that protocol device. Once the device is available, and it became available just now, we're going to spend a minute or two setting it up. And during the setup phase, we'll essentially make sure the device the Wi-Fi is on, that there are no pop-ups on the screen, that device screen is in right orientation, that we are back on the home screen, and so on and so on. So there is a procedure that we go before every remote access session to make sure that that you're receiving a device in the right condition. I have one session that I created before. Right here, let me refresh this window so we don't have to wait. And in the meantime, let's also check on Android Studio. So Android Studio, I believe, just created an APK. So it just built an application, so there are no build issues. And we'll upload this APK just in a second to Device Farm to see if this application actually works. Before we do this, I have to refresh this screen. Okay. So now the session is refreshing. And like I said, remote access gives you direct access to a device. You can see a device screen. Of course, I can interact with this device. I can swipe. I can go to apps and swipe through apps. Of course, I can launch any application that I want. So, for instance, I can go to Playbooks, for instance. This device doesn't have a Google account on it because we automatically cleaned all of the accounts. We cannot see any books in Playbooks, but essentially you can launch any application. Of course, in addition to launching applications that are already deployed onto a device, you can install your own application. So I'm going to install the application right now. I'm going to install the application that we built just a few minutes ago from the Mobile Hub Skeleton project. So this was Webinar 2, My Sample App. I'm going to App, Build, Outputs, APK, and here's my app debug APK. Let me upload this file, and this essentially puts this file in our S3 bucket, internal S3 bucket, and then from that S3 bucket, this app is going to be uploaded to a device, and you can see that it was just installed here, my sample app, and I can just launch it right now. So I launched the application, and it has those 4 things that we discussed enabled here. So this is, again, a demo application that has all of the initialization and the basic functional code stabbed in, so you can see how it works, see how it integrates, and actually play with this functionality. And if I actually go back to Android Studio, let's take a look at the layout here. You should be able to essentially see the same layout, all of the activities, the fragments for different things, those are actually things that we would see later once we start going in. But it's the same application that we just built in Android Studio. So for instance, if I go to, let's start with CloudLogic. So if I go to CloudLogic, I would like to demo CloudLogic code, and this gives me an ability to essentially invoke that Lambda function that we created. Let me hide the keyboard here. 1 second. All right. So I can invoke this function, and this function got invoked, and we get a result just like expected. I can of course change the value of key1 to something like value 55. Hit enter. Oops, enter was not a right call. And I can invoke, and Lambda should return me the same value. And this is essentially execution of this function that we looked at. If you looked at the dashboard, you will see, actually, will not see the stats for this function. But this is the execution of this particular function that we played with before. We could also modify this function on the fly. So I could go here to this function. Let's say that we're going to be retaining key 3 right now. So if I save this and test, so it's saved. Let's go back to this remote device. And now if I say invoke, it should return value 3. So let's see if that's the case. Yes, that's the case. So it invoked the modify Lambda function. And by the way, I mentioned this before, but I didn't stress that the device farm devices are real physical devices that are sitting in our data center. Those are not simulators and emulators. So what we're looking at right now is an actual screen of Samsung Galaxy S5 and the 18 flavor that is sitting somewhere in our data center. So that's the basic Lambda demo. If we went back to the Android Studio, I don't exactly remember where it is, but we should be able to find the actual code that invokes the Lambda function, so you can get an idea. If I actually go here, if you go CloudLogic demo fragment, this is actually where the invoke request is put together based on the inputs from these different fields, and this is where we actually invoke the Lambda function right here. So we are invoking, we're calling invoke on the Cloud Function client. An AWS Mobile Client, and we saw this before, is defined right here. So you can kind of see the chain of the call chain by looking at this code. So going back to our device and the sample application, let's look at some other functionalities that we are trying to demo here. Push notifications would be next. So if I go to push notifications, I can demo push notifications. So push notifications are already enabled. So if so I don't really have to do anything here in the application anymore. What I need to do right now is to actually generate a message. So if I go back to the hub, this is actually the wrong project. Let's go to the right project, Webinar 2. If I go back to Webinar 2 project in the hub and I go to resources, I can go to Amazon SNS topic. I can see Amazon SNS topic section here, and clicking on this link will take me directly to SNS console, where I can look at this topic and publish messages to this topic. So let's do this. I'm going to publish messages. and I'm going to create a message. And once the message is ready, I'm going to push this message, and it should come up on that device. So let's generate this message. Hit it's quick look here. Actually, this is a different device. Quick look over here onto the app. Publish message. The message was published, and it came up on the device right here. The code that was stubbed in the app that registered for notifications and was listening to messages from on that topic just received a message, and you can see it here. It works just like expected. And finally, let's look at the sign-in, and let's see how that works on that remote access session. So right now we are logged in as a guest, but I can sign in right here using Google+. So let's try doing that. Like I said, there's no Google account on that device, so I have to create one. So let me create an account real quick. All right, so the sign-in was successful. We don't need to back up or restore. And now, assuming that provided everything works fine, sign-in with Google succeeded. So you can see that that the Cognito-based user authentication worked just fine. And finally, analytics. There's a way to demo analytics here. If you look at the code, you can see, how you can instrument events. The sample app comes with 2 events. One is for some custom activity event. The second one is for some random monetization event. Since it takes up to 60 minutes for these events to populate the analytics dashboard, we will not be able to see these particular events as I click on them right now. But nonetheless, let's take a look at the analytics dashboard. So if I go to analytics here on the left, on the left-hand side, I can see that there are no events for this application yet, just because, again, it takes up to 60 minutes for these events to populate. But in about 1 hour, I should be seeing 4 events here. And like I mentioned before, analytics comes up with a number of KPIs out of the box, and you can customize them further. It's a very nice, powerful, and cheap service to track the engagement and retention of your users. So with that, and by the way, this is the second device that I requested. So as you can see, it came up just fine. But we used a different a Galaxy S5 device that I requested there just to save time. With that, let's move back to slides. This covers all of the aspects of the demo. Before we move to questions. Before we move to questions, just a quick reminder of what we covered today. So we covered 3 categories of different services that AWS has that help mobile developers build their apps. So first, develop that allow you to quickly and easy develop apps using things like serverless based on Lambda. Then we have tools that help you deliver high-quality applications, and Device Farm that we just seen as the best example of that, where you can run both manual and automated tests that help you deliver high-quality apps. And finally, Engage with services like Amazon Mobile Analytics and SNS that help you both track usage of your application as well as re-engage the users using, for instance, push notification or SMS-based campaigns. Thanks a lot for attending today's session, and let's move to questions.
All right, well, thank you, Powell. Thanks for the great presentation. I want to thank Andrew, Rohan, and Dennis for engaging our audience throughout the presentation and our Q&A. On the screen, you'll see our polls open. There's 3 at the bottom and 1 at the top of the screen. We do appreciate your feedback. And please remember to click on the radio buttons to choose your responses. You'll find our Q&A panel in the upper left corner of the screen, so you can keep putting your questions in there, and let's go ahead and move into our Q&A.
All right, so let's go over over some questions. The first question is where we can find pricing information on this. So these services are all priced independently of each other. So it's not like we have a one pricing option that covers all of the mobile services. So Lambda has its own pricing, SNS has its own pricing, Analytics has its own pricing, and you can find all of this information on AWS pricing pages. I already mentioned, just to give you a few examples, I already mentioned pricing for Amazon Analytics, where 100 million messages are free, and then you pay $1 per million messages. For Device Farm, pricing is either per minute or per month if you would like to have unlimited testing monthly subscription, and per minute price is 17 cents per minute. For monthly subscription, pricing starts at $250 per device slot per month. But I encourage you to go and look at AWS pricing page to find more pricing details about details on the other services that we talked about today. So one of the questions that was asked about Device Farm is there any method for simulating camera use on these devices? And these devices are real, so there's no need to simulate, but the way they're hosted means that you are likely not going to get any useful information from the picture. The picture is going to be either black or very, very blurred due to physical separation between devices. Another question which was also related to Device Farm was about testing audio activity. For instance, recording using a microphone. Again, the way devices are hosted, devices are physical, so you have access to microphone, but the way they're hosted means that you are likely, not going to get any useful audio feed because of the physical separation between these devices. Question about supporting hybrid apps. So the question was, does this platform support hybrid apps such as Apache Cordova? So specifically about Device Farm is not really platform specific. Yes, you can test Cordova apps. When it comes to automation, you can build automation scripts in selected frameworks that will work fine with hybrid apps. When it comes to other AWS mobile services, you can consume them not just from the native code. So the short answer is yes. AWS Mobile SDK is not for native apps is not the only way to consume these services. You can do this outside of Objective-C or Android Java environment. Question about designing the app. Which service is best to design my app UI using AWS Mobile Hub? So, like I mentioned before, Mobile Hub is somewhat agnostic. While today let me rephrase this. Mobile Hub today leans towards native experiences, either Objective-C or Swift or Android Java. But when you look at AWS services in general, you can consume them from any mobile experience. When it comes to finding something that works best with AWS Mobile Hub, like you've seen in the demo, Mobile Hub generates either standard Android Studio or Xcode project. So if you would like to use the AWS Mobile Hub as a skeleton or be able to reuse as much of the code from that skeleton, then sticking to just native environments from Google and Apple would be your best bet. All right. Since there are no more questions, I think we're going to wrap up. Thanks again for participating in today's session, and feel free to follow up with any questions after the webinar. Thank you.
I'd like to send a special thanks to our presenter, Powell, for the time and great presentation you gave us today. I'd like to also thank Andrew, Rohan, and Dennis for answering our audience's questions through the Q&A panel. If you have any comments on previous and upcoming webinars or suggestions on topics you wish AWS to cover in future webinars, please feel free to email us at aws-webcasts@amazon.com. Your feedback will help us improve our webinar programming. Thank you to our audience today for joining us. Have a great day.